Та-дан! Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Вітаємо вас в Українському медіа-центрі реформ з нашим щоденним брифінгом щодо ходу реформ в Україні. Сьогодні 3 серпня і в нас ми підводимо певні підсумки.
So we are summing up some progress in reforms over July this year, and traditionally August is the month when we sum up the reforms and prepare the agenda for September, and I think that within the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center we will be able to talk in a clearer way about our next reforms and what has happened over July. So the most attention is being given in Ukraine to institutional reforms, the reforms when they change not only the norms but the work of institutions, and over July there was the highest level of attention was given to the new patrol service. It started to work early in July in Kyiv. Today they are training police in Lutsk, Kharkiv and Odessa, and they are also selecting candidates for training in Odessa, in Mykolaiv, Dnipropetrovsk and Uzhgorod. And this means that the program for the information about the new police is unfolding. In general, it will take almost 2 years and will embrace all the regions of Ukraine and will mean the creation of the new system of interior law enforcement bodies. Also, the State Border Service of Ukraine started to accept applications from military who want to take part in the competition for the new control point Kyiv, which is the unit that guards the border in Kyiv's airports, Boryspil, Zhulian and Hostomel. This is another step in forming a new composition of personnel and law enforcement bodies. On the 15th of July, the new law and prosecutor's office has become active, and right after this, the management of the prosecutor's office opened the competition for vacancies, and it is open not only to prosecutors' offices workers. Now they are accepting applications, and over the next several months there will be a competition to fill in vacancies. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau continues to select personnel, 215 candidates for the detective position have been selected, and there will be an individual interview with every one of them. Also, they are hiring personnel for the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. This is one of the most visible results of reforms over July. Also, 100 centers for free secondary legal help have started to work in Ukraine, providing legal help to socially sensitive strata of population. Apart from providing help in access to justice, this institute is important to help people in such sectors as subsidies, pensions, in those spheres where the government in fact gives people an opportunity to more actively defend their rights. It is very important also that at the beginning of July the Ministry for Education and Science started to hire personnel for the Institute of Modernization of the Contents of Education, which is one of the basic entities in the system of education in Ukraine that form the requirements for the educational programs, and they will be responsible for studying programs and learning programs according to which our children will study. In July, the government has adopted the resolution and the state service for the food safety, and they appointed its management. It assembles 5 different services: veterinary, phytosanitary, and the inspection for the protection of consumers, agricultural inspection, and probing chamber. So in fact they are in organization which joined the forces of 5 services whose work is very sensitive for both business and consumers. It is very important that after it's been appointed, the managers have been appointed, they are starting to select personnel. This is the sign of a new approach to the work of state service. In July, rather active was the discussion of the institutional reform of the state fiscal service. As of today, they are talking about this on the level of concept. And in August and September, we expect that a series of decisions will be adopted that will provide foundations for the revamping of the state fiscal service. When we're talking about legal framework of reform in July, on the 16th of July, the Parliament has adopted the draft changes for the Constitution as far as decentralization is concerned, and on the 28th of July, the Constitutional Court has adopted positive conclusions about these changes, and they say that the Constitutional Court does not see any violation of the rights of citizens in relation with the suggested constitutional amendments. So this opens a way for the further conduct of this reform. The Parliament has to vote for these amendments again, and this provides an opportunity to accelerate the process of decentralization. And before the 15th of August, almost 10% of territorial communities can adopt decision on voluntary amalgamation, which will provide them to an opportunity to hold local elections according to a new structure. Also, the Parliament has adopted the law on local elections, and we will be able to follow the practical course of decentralization and the practical process of merger of communities and the transfer of authority to them. And it is necessary to adopt another 20 or so legal acts that in practice transfer authority from central bodies to local bodies of power. On the 31st of July, the International Monetary Fund has confirmed its decision to provide the second tranche of standby loan to the tune of $1.7 billion. This was preceded by the decision of the Parliament of Ukraine pertaining to the financial stabilization, in particular the strengthening of the institutional ability and independence of the National Bank of Ukraine, and this means both authority and financial independence of the National Bank of Ukraine. We were talking about this more than once at our briefings. This law was adopted and signed by the President, and in July the Parliament has also adopted the law on market criteria for setting tariffs for communal services. It also gave authority to the Naftogaz national company to levy debt from those who were previously exempt from this, and the Parliament has significantly strengthened the authority and the organizational structure of the Fund for Guaranteeing Deposits, which is important not only for the cooperation with the IMF, but also to regulate, to settle the problematic issues that arose in Ukraine because of the liquidation of a number of banks. When we're talking about improvement of investment climate and new legal framework, there were some indicative examples in the sphere of seaports and sanitary control. When we're talking about phytosanitary control, we should remind you that the Parliament has adopted a new law on plant quarantine, which is very important where the turnover of grain in Ukraine is concerned. Although this is a technical law, it does complete the 18 months long work on deregulation and simplification of the work on the quarantine control over grain transportation in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine. In connection with this, because this law has simplified the documentation significantly, the time framework of issuing documents, and we should also mention the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers about the simplification and improvement of the work of seaports of Ukraine, which does allow in a simpler way to load and unload grain in Ukraine. This block of decisions, in fact, solves all the critical issues of regulation in grain sphere, and it does allow to normally work one of the most important markets of Ukraine, where Ukraine is one of the biggest exporters. This month, another very important change in anti-corruption, anti-monopoly committee has happened. In July, the new composition of the committee has started to work, headed by Mr. Terentiev. On the 25th of July, it was the first time when the anti-monopoly committee has gathered in the new composition. They have adopted the decision to publish their own decisions, and the committee in fact announced the amnesty about those concentrations that were executed without permit, and they also published the the draft principle of calculation of fines for violation of regulations. These three decisions are very indicative, as over 10 years, the international community and the business community was demanding from the Anti-Monopoly Commission these decisions. However, the situation developed in a way that, because of the previous non-desire of Anti-Monopoly Committee to use these practices, it is very indicative that the Anti-Monopoly Committee has not waited for the Parliament, and they really started to use those decisions that lead to transparency and being easily forecast. And of course, the Anti-Monopoly Committee will soon adopt a lot of very important decisions in different spheres of Ukrainian economy. The Parliament of Ukraine has also voted for providing access to the registers of property in Ukraine, and everyone will be able to, free of charge, get to know about the registration of property to someone, and this allows to very simply and without payment to get to know about which property belongs to whom, and this will allow to remove insinuations about different assets of people who work in the policy making of Ukraine. Also, a lot of attention was given to the transparency of state procurement in Ukraine. In fact, all the ministers have switched to the Prozoro system for under-threshold purchases. which means for purchases less than to the tune of less than 100,000 hryvnia, and Kiev City Council and the Lviv City Council are now using this system. However, although this system does acquire a great popularity because of a number of circumstances, the parliament was not able to adopt a respective law that would allow to really simplify the state procurement procedures when they are to the tune of more than 100,000 hryvnia, and they are going to raise this threshold to 200,000 hryvnia, and also to simplify the procedures over this threshold. It does simplify the administration of procurement. It also makes the contracts with the state more attractive for business, which is very important within the conditions of economic crisis, when it is necessary to provide business with more opportunities to realize its produce. We also expect that the parliament will come back to reconsider another law, and maybe during the extraordinary sitting of the parliament, the Minister for Economy and Trade plans to submit a draft law on the electronic systems for state procurement for over-threshold amounts. This will be a priority for the Minister of Economy and the Parliament in autumn. Among those draft laws that were not adopted by the Parliament and which are priority for the work of the Parliament, priority number one, there is legislation on public service. Also, the Parliament was not able to start to consider 2940 draft law in the second reading because of the huge number of amendments, and because the committee of the Parliament was not able to put it to voting, to submit it to voting. However, it is very important that the draft law on public service and the reform of public service also has now a draft law about the Cabinet of Ministers and central bodies of executive power, which were submitted last week, and in September they will be one of the priorities of the work of the Parliament. Also, the priorities that have moved from summer to autumn is one of the draft laws about the reform of public health, about the autonomization of medical institutions. This is the first basic stage of the reform of public health, and a lot of successful decentralization depends on it, because it does provide for medical institutions becoming self-sustained financial institutions. Also, the National Council for Reforms marks a number of laws about state procurement, where the political actors do pay a lot of attention, and we expect that the Parliament will consider it in September. There was a number of decisions on tax issues, and also about the value-added tax, and there was an agreement between the government and the business about those issues, and the correction norms were adopted, and the President has signed them. we're talking about some specifics there, in particular about those who work with a turnover of over 1 million hryvnia, and also there were mechanisms introduced in the system of electronic administration that allow to avoid overpayment, and these systems have started to work from the 1st of July. They will be taken into account during the tax reform. On the 21st of August, they will consider this at the sitting of the National Council for Reforms. Besides, the Ministry of Finance has adopted a law that regulates the issues of overpayment, and this problem was amassed in 2013 and 14, although this problem was solved on the level of the tax code. At the moment, a certain part of payments and registering them still has a problem on the level of departmental regulations, but the Ministry of Finance has removed this problem and opened the way to regulate them. As we see in July, the system, there was a number of important technical decisions in the tax sphere that allow to find a compromise between the interests of the state and the business, and we'll hope that the tax reform will reflect a consensus between the business and public organizations. So I'll remind you again that August is traditionally a time to form agenda for September, so we will talk about how those decisions are being introduced. Please follow our briefings and ask for our announcements and releases. I wish everyone a good day.